I think all the big bull runs for the past 10 years have been driven by private markets or the retail market rather. And I think that what we're going to be seeing in 25 and beyond is a new wave, and that wave is like a tsunami.
The product is really like a mix of different products because there's a hardware piece. Actually, people will be using, as of 2025, Ledger Stacks to sign their transactions on Ledger Enterprise. But it has a software piece as well, which is like a SaaS model that allows you to create the governance piece and then to be able to transact through that. And our first customers were exchanges, custodians, and asset managers. And they remain those three major verticals.
I think that it's important for people who maybe don't know this about Ledger to know that we do offer an enterprise solution to exchanges and other custodians.
That's being used by some of the biggest names in the business. The institutional wave means that a lot of people that didn't have crypto on their balance sheet will start having crypto on their balance sheet, and they're going to need to secure that crypto.
As an asset manager, I could use multiple custodians that are using Ledger to do that as well?
So one of the big things is being able to trade off exchange because there's no counterparty risk, meaning that your assets are never on the exchange. So if anything happens to the exchange,
which might also be important from a governance perspective for me, depending on who I am.
So the security aspect is the number one for sure. The flexibility aspect is really the second one. And then the third one is the fact that because you're able to pledge to multiple exchanges at the same time, you don't have to do as many back and forth. And so you're going to be able to reduce your fees in some cases by 80%.
People always thought of Ledger as cold storage. But now, a lot of the activity that we see with Ledger is people buying, trading, staking, using Ledger Live to do everything that they do.
What's really interesting is that in all the conversations that we're having, it feels like there's an aha moment of saying, wow, like this is what we've been waiting for. If you want to make sure that your hundreds of millions or billions in assets are secure, this is really the only way to get it done. Your enterprise software shouldn't be harder to use than any of your personal apps that you have on your phone, for example, right? Like, why? Why does enterprise have to be more complicated? It doesn't have to.
Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome back to the Ledger Podcast. I hope you were able to take some time off during the holidays, recharging your batteries and spending time with loved ones. 2025 will be marking some major shifts, and one of them is probably going to be institutional adoption. The institutions are coming. If you've been in the crypto space for a while, this phrase used to sound like a meme, signaling wider market adoption, but now it's a reality. Bitcoin spot ETFs launched in 2024, bringing billions of dollars in inflows. BlackRock's ETF alone crossed $30 billion worth of value. ETH spot ETFs are following suit, and companies are putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets. There's even chatter about Bitcoin being adopted as a strategic reserve asset. Plus, RWAs is taking the center stage with funds pushing for global digitization of real-world assets. So with this in mind, institutions are quickly realizing that the systems and hardware that they use to manage these millions and billions of dollars in value must evolve. And that's where Ledger Enterprise and Tradelink come in. Today, Ian Rogers, Ledger's Chief Experience Officer, is speaking with Sebastian Badeau, Ledger's VP of Enterprise, to talk about the shift in the market and the increased institutional interest in digital assets and why it's more important than ever to secure your digital assets treasuries. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
Seb, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us here in the studio.
It's my first time. I'm so excited.
How does it feel?
It feels very comfortable.
And happy 2025. We're sitting here at the very beginning of January 2025. I'm having flashbacks to January of 2021 from a market perspective, but really from a narrative perspective, it's completely different in 2025 and very focused on institutions. So tell the audience, what you do here at Ledger and how it relates to the 2025 crypto cycle.
So I run the beautiful, amazing enterprise team at Ledger. I've been doing this for a couple of years. And I mean, we'll talk a little bit about how.
How long has Ledger had an enterprise team?
So,
Because I think
yeah.
most people don't know.
So that's a really interesting point. Ledger celebrated its 10-year anniversary this year, but it also celebrated the 5-year anniversary of Ledger Enterprise. So we didn't do a tour, maybe we'll do it in 25, but it is the 5-year anniversary. And I think that there's a similarity between the two, because when Ledger, the other thing that celebrated its 5-year anniversary is Ledger Live, which also I think was created 5 years ago. And there's a real parallel there, because I think that when Ledger was started, it was, nanos and it was really buy and hold and that's it. You can really do that much more than just secure your crypto, which is very important for sure, but that was just one step. And then 5 years ago, we decided to, hey, maybe you can do more. You can buy, you can trade, you can sell, you can stake, you can swap, you can do all these different things that happen over time.
And that became Ledger Live.
And that became Ledger Live. And at the same time, we created Ledger Enterprise, which was Ledger Nano for Enterprise 5 years back. And now we're getting into the Ledger Live phase of Ledger Enterprise, if you will, which we'll talk about when we talk about Tradelink. But so yes, it's a 5-year journey, and I think that we are at the cusp of something really, really important, like a real transformation on what we do, because what we built at first was a solution to help institutions, basically hold and secure their crypto and create a governance layer over or on top of that, which is really important, because if you own crypto, you have your keys and that's enough. But if you're a hedge fund, if you're an asset manager, if you're an exchange, et cetera, you can have one person, have all the keys and the secrets, right? You need to be able to spread that over different stakeholders.
I actually just want to pause on that, because it seems somewhat obvious, but the amount of times that I've had this conversation with sophisticated people and I've seen the realization come into their face makes it worth underlining for me. What you just said, which is that if you are an individual, the security of the Ledger Nanos and Stacks and Flex, they give you all the security you need to have self-custody of your digital assets.
Correct.
But if you are not an individual, if you are an organization, then you need governance, because otherwise, who has the key, right? Is it your most trustworthy IT person? By the way, I have twice had that in my very first year here at Ledger, had that phone call, which is an organization calling and saying, we've lost multiple millions of worth of digital assets. Say, okay, who has the recovery key? Well, our IT person. Okay, where are they? We don't know. They are now missing, along with the money. That's a real story. Another one that we had this was a Web3 gaming company in 2021 who had all of their assets as a company on a Nano, but the CEO was in charge and had the recovery phrase backed up digitally somewhere, was compromised, and the treasury of the company was taken. So I point out these. Now, we also is it still true that there are large exchanges out there that run on Ledger Nanos?
I mean, for sure, there are large organizations that do. I think it's changing and evolving over time. We've had those same conversations I've had a few years back, and people would come back to me and tell me, this is working fine for us. But then after you explain to them what they can do with Enterprise, they come back to you and understand why it actually makes sense. I think a lot of the issues that have happened over time also are making people aware of the fact that you have to do it right, that at one point or another, when regulation comes, you have to be able to show that you're doing it right. And what's amazing about Enterprise, that I'm talking about governance, but it's also fully auditable, so you can actually show an auditor, look, this is what we've put in place, and checks and balances are there, and that really matters. So I think that we're moving as any industry from maybe like a Wild West kind of way of doing things to a more safe approach, and part of that is building the rails, and I think that the Enterprise is really very much the rails for institutional players. And to your point originally on 25, what we saw in 24 is about $40 billion coming from institutions through the ETFs, which is a trickle of what the institutional market is, right? Like institutions have like 100, like in the US alone, have something like 150 trillion in assets, right? Like, I'm not talking crypto, I'm talking overall assets. So what is the 40 billion is 0.02% of of that amount. But clearly, if I'm an asset manager right now and I'm looking at what I did last year in 24, and I look at my performance, and I wasn't invested one way or another in Bitcoin or crypto as a whole, I didn't do my job right? Another thing that I think is really interesting is the biggest holders of assets in the U.S. are pension funds, and pension funds actually legally cannot own crypto right now. Their bylaws say that they cannot own crypto. So what do? They buy MicroStrategy, and that's a hedge. That's a way for them to hold crypto. But if regulation evolves, maybe they'll be able to buy crypto, and that will be a major inflow. So for sure, what we expect is I think all the big bull runs for the past 10 years have been driven by the private markets or the retail market rather. And I think that what we're going to be seeing in 25 and beyond is a new wave, and that wave is like a tsunami coming from institutions.
Yeah, and I think, and for our audience, I really want to make sure that they understand what Ledger Enterprise is and who it's for, and why it exists. Because I think that when people think of Ledger, they think of secure self-custody for the retail customer, and many people don't even know that we have enterprise. For me, when you look at who we are and what we stand for, we stand for a belief in the future of digital assets. We believe in self-custody, and if self-custody, then security, right? Because having self-custody without security is madness. From my perspective, enterprise flows very naturally out of that because, okay, well, if you're an institution, and you also want to have self-custody, you want to limit your counterparty risk, how do you do that? But with governance, right? So I think the best way that I've found to explain it to people is it's exactly everything that Ledger stands for in terms of security and self-custody, but it's for an organization. Correct. It's for a group of people, and we're doing that. And what kind of group is it actually for in terms of a product? What is the product, and who is that product best for today?
I mean, the product is really like a mix of different products because there's a hardware piece. Actually, people will be using, as of 2025, Ledger Stacks to sign their transactions on Ledger Enterprise. But it has a software piece as well, which is like a SaaS model that allows you to create the governance piece and then to be able to transact through that piece. So the equivalent of a Ledger Live, but which is really like linked to the Ledger Enterprise. So it's really like the mix between the two. As far as who it's for, I think it's for anyone that holds like a certain amount of crypto and that has an organization where there's more than one person that actually holds the crypto. So, as I said, our first customers were, we built a solution because some of our customers that were using Nano said, hey, but we need governance. And we're like, hey, actually, that makes sense. Let's build it for them, right? Like we built it based on feedback that we got from people that we were talking to. And our first customers were exchanges, custodians, and asset managers. And they remain those three major verticals, right? So any custodians obviously have billions in assets, exchanges have billions in assets, asset managers are between hundreds of millions, some have billions in assets. If you hold assets and you need to, and I think that, what we're doing and the evolution of the solution is to go from just the security piece to what you're going to be able to do with it. And I think that one of the big things that we're doing also in 2025 is introducing the capacity to trade these assets. And what's amazing there is that if you're an asset manager and you have less than 100 million, or less than 50 million, and so maybe it doesn't make sense for you to buy our solution, you will still be able to trade secured by Ledger Enterprise through the solution that we call Tradelink that we'll talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that in 1 second. I want to you mentioned exchanges, and I think it's interesting, for our audience, because I think many people out there probably think of Ledger as an alternative to exchanges, but you just said that exchanges are actually Ledger Enterprise customers, and I think it's a great opportunity to remind people that what we are is really security maximalists, right? And I always say to my friends, look, there's only two places that it makes sense to keep your digital assets. One is a trusted exchange, and two would be secure self-custody. an untrusted custodian or insecure self-custody or even less secure self-custody is off the table. Those shouldn't actually be options. So I think that it's important for people who maybe don't know this about Ledger to know that we do offer an enterprise solution to exchanges and other custodians.
That's being used by some of the biggest names in the business.
Well,
right?
and to your point that they are taking advantage of the extraordinary security and the auditability to get to increase their level of insurance, to increase, I remember, and maybe I'm speaking out of school, and if we decide so, we can edit this out, but I remember Pascal talking to Sam Bankman-Fried about Ledger Enterprise and saying, you should really care about the security of the assets. And he's like, I have some guys who worry about that, right? And we found out
that happened.
We found out that he didn't really, or they didn't worry too hard about it. But in other words, if you are using a custodian, what they are using as a security solution is your business.
Correct.
And you should sleep better at night if that custodian is using Ledger Enterprise.
Absolutely. And I think, back to that point, when everything that came out from the findings, et cetera, and the trial showed that they were using, and Ledger was not named, but they were using personal devices to back up.
And so they had some TXT files with
exactly,
with the recovery phrases in them. Yeah.
And so clearly that's not the way to do it. Yeah. And I think that this, in some ways, there's a level of wake up call, but I think, and going back to that point on institutions coming to the market, institutional players more and more, when a BlackRock gets into crypto, or Vanguard, or Citadel, which isn't there yet, but we'll get there at some point. Like we had Ken Griffin right before the holidays talk about the fact that he wished he would have invested in crypto, which he hasn't, but probably he will in 25. These people know how to do it right. And the checks and balances that are needed to do it right in crypto aren't that much more complicated than what they do. Actually, they're probably less complicated than what they have to do with all the regulation around finance in the US and everywhere in the world, right? Like the KYC, the KYBs and all that stuff. But everything, every trade, et cetera, has to be approved, showed, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that for the traditional asset managers and the traditional investors that have been in banking and in finance for a while, for them, moving into crypto is not going to be something that different from a lot of the tools that they use. But they will definitely want to do it right because they have to have the checks and balances, because they have a board and all these different things.
So let's go through the kind of the onboarding a little bit. And what I mean by that is, what are the types of organizations that you expect to adopt Ledger Enterprise in the first half of this year? Because there are people who, maybe weren't looking for this solution 2 years ago, but they are today. So who are those people? And then if I'm one of those people, what are you selling to me? What's the pitch exactly? And then when I say yes, how does it work?
Yeah. So I think there are two things, right? The first one is that, going back again to the institutional wave, the institutional wave means that a lot of people that didn't have crypto on their balance sheet will start having crypto on their balance sheet, and they're going to need to secure that crypto. So, so I'm expecting a lot of traditional asset managers to become customers of Ledger in 25 because they didn't need it before because they didn't have any crypto, and they will in the coming years. I think.
And the regulation in the U.S. is likely to open that up. They were just like, I'd like to do this, but due to the regulation, I can't touch it.
So I think regulation is going to be a huge deal, and the U.S. is 50% of the market, right? It's 50% of assets are in the U.S. I think a lot of them left the U.S. because of the fact that there was so much unknown to the space. A lot of them went to Bahamas or Dubai or Hong Kong, et cetera. I think some will come back, but then a lot of people were being really just waiting on what was going to happen. I think that we'll see, obviously, when regulation actually happens, but people are getting ready for sure. So I'm expecting quite a big flow, traditional asset managers, and especially in the US, but everywhere in the world, because also the bull run, et cetera, et cetera.
Where are the other great markets for Ledger Enterprise?
I think APAC, obviously, Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, Emirates, et cetera. Those are the big three. Right, so US wouldn't have been part of the big three, but I think will be in 25. And then APAC
And what about here in Europe?
I think Europe is a little, I mean, there's definitely opportunities. We're seeing a lot of things happening, the big banks getting into play. So we'll see. They move a bit slower than they do in the other markets, you know. But of course, Europe will definitely, and we're headquartered here. So we have obviously like great relationships with a lot of actors here. And so we'll see what happens. But clearly, like in terms of, you know, getting to market, we're seeing a lot more speed in the other markets than we do in Europe. In Europe, we feel that it takes a bit longer. It will get there. I've seen it, you know, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. Like during the internet wave, like Europe was behind, and then like they caught up. They probably will catch up also in crypto. Right now, I feel that they're a bit slower getting into the game. So that's one piece. And then the second piece, which I think is really important, is that as we've built this off-exchange trading platform that we call Tradelink. The really amazing thing about it, I mean, there are many amazing things about it, but one of the amazing things about it is that if you're an asset manager and you want to trade off exchange, you're going to be able to do it using Ledger Enterprise without necessarily being a Ledger Enterprise customer. What I mean by that is that the setup is that I have some money, I'm going to use a custodian that's going to pledge the money onto an exchange. So the money will never be on the exchange specifically, only during the settlement of the trade. Which means that the only person in the setup that needs to be secured by Ledger is the custodian.
Is the custodian.
Right. What that means, and this is really a revolution, is that thousands of asset managers will be able to trade securely and cheaper than they've been doing using this setup as of 2025. So I think that what we're going to be seeing is a huge flow also of people who won't necessarily be our customers to start. What I'm hoping is that they will become our customers over time. So I think that they will become our customer over time. But even if they don't end up being our customers, there's going to be a major inflow onto the overall platform. So
it's actually positive. From an enterprise perspective, it's analogous to an exchange. In a way, because if I might be a retail customer and I'm actually using Ledger Enterprise and I don't know it because it's just behind the scenes at the exchange. Kind of. And similarly here, I might be an asset manager and I'm actually using not only Ledger, but Ledger Enterprise, not only Ledger Enterprise, but also Tradelink because I'm doing off-exchange trading using that custodian. And as an asset manager, I could use multiple custodians that are using Ledger to do that as well?
So one of the big things is, assets are never on the exchange. So if anything happens to the exchange,
which might also be important from a governance perspective. Absolutely. For me, depending on who I am.
So we've had many asset managers who couldn't trade on certain exchanges, but with that setup, their board said, "Oh, on that setup, you can do it."
Right.
So it changes the perspective there. So that's very important. The second thing is obviously the flexibility that it gives you, because you can have any setup that you want. So you can use multiple custodians, multiple exchanges. You have a dashboard that allows you to say, I'm going to pledge this amount here, this amount there. And it's really, I think the flexibility aspect, so the security aspect is the number one for sure. The flexibility aspect is really the second one. And then the third one is the fact that because you're able to pledge to multiple exchanges at the same time, you don't have to do as many back and forth. And so you're going to be able to reduce your fees in some cases by 80%. And so at the end of the day, if you're an asset manager, the game is a hedge game, right? It's like, where am I going to be able to make the best trade, right, at the best price and reduce my costs as much as possible? And this gives you the way to have access to all of the exchanges, but then also to be able to reduce your costs. So that's
super exciting. And I also understand the analogy used at the beginning, which is this is kind of the Ledger Live or the services moment for for enterprise. Yeah. And just to flesh that out for people who are watching or listening, again, people always thought of Ledger as cold storage. But now, a lot of the activity that we see with Ledger is people buying, trading, staking, using Ledger Live to do everything that they do with their crypto. Early days of Ledger Enterprise is very much cold storage for enterprise. Correct. Right. And today, I mean,
we did do staking. So we have staking partners such as Kiln and Figment, etc. And staking is important for enterprise customers, but this is like next level. And again, the big thing is that it really widens the net, right? Like it's not just, the Ledger Enterprise customers that can do it. Like anyone can, is invited to this party, and anyone can have access to all this liquidity and all these different exchanges. And then also, the asset managers that we talk to are really interested in the fact that it's really a global place. So there are custodians in every market, there are exchanges in every market. And so that's where you're going to be able to work off of that. And so it's, what's really interesting is that in all the conversations that we're having, it feels like there's an aha moment of saying, wow, like this is what we've been waiting for. And now it's a question of just, getting out the door and making sure that, because it's really a flywheel, right? Like the more assets are on the platform, the more custodians are going to want to participate, because at the end of the day, they're going to make more money off of it, and then the more exchanges are going to want it as well, because they want to have these new inflows, right? Like a lot, as I was mentioning, we have a lot of asset managers who could not, put their assets onto these exchanges, and now are going to be able to do it. So it's really a win-win for all three participants in the ecosystem.
And this mirrors what I've heard from the market, being out there talking about Ledger Enterprise and particularly Tradelink. That does feel like a bit of a tipping point for many customers. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say this just now as well. What I've heard is the things that they find attractive about it are being able to use multiple custodians, being able to use multiple exchanges, security, of course. And pricing,
exchange trading, and pricing,
and pricing.
Yeah,
those are the things. That covers the pitch a bit, I guess, right? What's the actual product like? Because very few people have actually seen the Ledger Enterprise product. If I'm one of these organizations, well, first of all, I'm going to get a Ledger Stacks, so that's nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Maybe you'll get multiple. You'll get like 15,
and maybe with my logo engraved on them.
Will.
So it's gonna look good on my desk. That's a nice thing as a starting point. But what's the day-to-day use of the product like, and who in the organization is using it?
I think that again, there are the two different use cases, right? Like on the cold storage case, it's more about think of it as what we do in typical organizations. When if you have to sign a sponsorship for $10,000, maybe you need two people to validate that sponsorship. If you're spending $1 million to do something else, you might need the CEO to be involved. And it's the same here, right? So the idea is that you create your governance and your rules, right? Like the rules and the rules are very specific to your company, right? Like, so if you're a company of 3, it might be just like 3 people, and then you might say, well, for anything under this amount, we need 2 signatures, and then anything over that amount, we need like everyone to sign them. So, but again, there's flexibility there, and then the point that you're making on Stacks is important, because up until now, we had another. And I know that that's the first device that you ever bought, which was a Ledger Blue, which was an older device. And I think that what's really great here is that even though it functions very much the same as any of our hardware, but I think for anyone who is involved in the crypto space, if they're using a personal Stacks, it'll be so easy for them to be sign transactions for their business using the same hardware. Yeah. So I think that's a big evolution, and that's something that we really wanted as a company, to make sure that our best customers, which are our enterprise customers, they're the ones who give us the most money, have our best product.
But also, I mean, just having a secure device is important. I think I was actually surprised how few people really understood why having a secure screen matters, particularly in enterprise applications, and the fact that with some other platforms you're just using a mobile app to do that, and I don't think there's broad appreciation for why signing one of your enterprise transactions on a Ledger device is far more secure than signing it on your phone alone. We saw the Radiant Capital hack. So how does Ledger Enterprise obviate these kinds of real security risks for an enterprise?
I mean, it's definitely the best way to secure any transaction that you're going to be doing. I think that mobile can work because it does give you, it's easier, etc. It's faster. So for some maybe like smaller things that you may need to do, it might make sense. But as soon as you're going to enter into like big trades, or you're going to be entering into moving like vast amount of crypto, you definitely want to have the most secure solution that's out there. We know that the Ledger solution is definitely the best by far. It's enterprise grade. It's it's never been hacked. Dungeon obviously like working on enterprise like they do on our consumer hardware. So when you're talking about pitching, I think when we're talking to customers, what I tell them, they ask about the price, and the price obviously is important because we're securing very, very large amounts of crypto. But I tell them like the price is really like the price of how well you're going to be sleeping and your peace of mind. Like that is priceless, right? Like you want to make sure that if you want to make sure that your hundreds of millions or billions in assets are secure, this is really the only way to get it done. So I think that's the thing. And then as you were asking how and it's true that people don't see the product. So they will see, like anyone who has a stacks, if they use enterprise, they'll be using the same hardware. And then the software piece, I mean, well, we have videos that show what it's like. The Tradelink piece, same thing, but it's very much like any SaaS platform that you may be using, right? If you're using Salesforce, if you're using Payflows, if you're using, and all of us use all of these SaaS platforms day to day for whatever we do in our businesses, right? It's very much an extension of that. It looks very similar, and it's secure login, etc. But then what matters is that when you actually have to do a transaction, it goes back to the device, and then you make sure that you're secured by Ledger.
Yeah, and I think just to pause on security for a moment, I think it's important for people to remember that the amount of energy that someone will expend on an attack or a theft is proportional to the amount that they might gain.
Absolutely.
Right, and so going after institutions is going to pay bigger dividends than going after individuals. And so, I mean, I think that's, the Radiant Capital hack was a great example, because I think with individuals, we see a lot of phishing, we see a lot of like pretty low cost attacks, but the Radiant Capital one was very sophisticated, very targeted.
And they're going to get more and more sophisticated.
And they are getting more and more sophisticated, especially as you said, if you take the front part of what you said, which is, that over the next, it'll year and years to come, we're going to see a lot of institutional money come in. Well, trillions. Okay, those are big prizes.
It's bigger than the overall market. Probably the inflows will be bigger than the overall market cap of crypto today.
Yeah. So if you are, a rogue organization, which is, targeting, digital assets in a diehard kind of way, except that, moving billions in digital assets is much easier than moving billions in bars of gold.
Or gold, yeah.
These institutions is where you're going to target. So as an institution, having, governance, secure hardware, these things really become imperative.
And a secure trading platform. I think all three. And I think that, that's the really interesting thing, is that we're really at this very important moment where, and you could call it, some level of, perfect storm, if you will, of, that these inflows, the regulation becoming more and more favorable to crypto, which then brings on more and more institutional money, and then I think, through the bear market, we've been really busy working on building the right thing to make sure we can catch that wave, and we're here today. So it's really a question of like riding it as well as possible.
I mean, it sounds like Tradelink is the perfect product for this cycle.
It really is. And I think trading is going to be, and we know it, right? There's $280 billion that get traded every day in regular assets.
And why is the pricing of Tradelink better than another solution that someone might go with?
Because what I was explaining is that you have all of your pledge, like the money that you're going to be pledging, is standing with a custodian. And so instead of having to do many back and forth, and each back and forth will cost you money, here you can just do it from one place. So instead of, depending on how many trades that you're doing, on how many exchanges and how many custodians, you're going to be reducing your overall cost because you're doing it only from one place. So and to my point, like in some cases, it's going to be reduced by 80% because if you're doing it on 5 exchanges and here you only do it basically in 1 because you're pledging only to the custodian who then does the pledges to the exchanges for you. So it's huge. It's a huge change for them.
Okay, so I'm listening right now and I'm sold. How do I
sign up?
Yeah, but also how do I get in, like, more practically speaking? I mean, obviously we're talking about, big asset managers here. These are not short sales cycles. No. I assume. So how does someone come into the fold?
I mean, I think the best way is, we have an enterprise website, is to go to that website and request a demo, and then we'll have people from our team come in and talk to you guys. I mean, there's a lot of content on the site that can answer a lot of the questions, the first questions, to make sure that you're the right fit
on enterprise.ledger.com.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the difference in what we do is we don't talk to millions of customers like we do on the consumer side. We talk to thousands of customers. So we have teams in APAC, we have teams in Dubai, we have teams in the US, and teams in Europe. And so we're able to, we're more than happy to spend the time with people to walk them through the solution, onboard them, explain to them how they can benefit from both the enterprise product and the Tradelink product. And that's what we've been doing, right? We don't wait for people to call on us, we actually call on them. But if anyone wants to call on us, we'll be happy to take that call and to walk them through.
Okay. I'll give you a few rapid fire questions before we leave here. What's the question you receive the most frequently from prospective Ledger Enterprise customers?
I think a lot of times it's around pricing. People want to know if it's a good fit for them. I often answer that it's expensive, but it's buying them peace of mind, which is probably the most important thing that they can have. There's often something also around, will it work for me, right? Like, can I make it so that it matches my organization, right? Can I customize it in different ways? And I think that's where the governance rules and everything you can do actually allows you to do that. So I think those are like the two things: pricing and customization. Make sure that it matches my needs. Those are like the two main things.
How do you approach the pricing one? Because I know that the way that some competitors, there's a lot of hidden pricing. Mm-hmm. There's more hidden pricing than there is with us. So how do you sell against somebody who's just trying to close a deal and they're gonna show you the full pricing later when you're trying to be fully above board with what things cost?
That's something that we actually did also in 24, is to really be very transparent on our pricing and really change our models to basically come up with this idea of like different tiers. So if you know that your needs are linked to $100 million, it's not going to grow, etc. We're going to give you like a flat fee. You're going to pay this much. It's not going to change. There's not going to be any overages, etc. But then if you want is a lot of flexibility and you want basically to pay less as you go because you're gonna really grow a lot, then we're gonna give you like a more customized pricing solution. But at the end of the day, it's really about transparency, I think. So we have these discussions and I think customers really get it. And nothing is hidden, right? Like there's no hidden fees.
Because what I've heard from others is that the price wasn't what they thought it was, going in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, having a low headline, it's like Ryanair, right? Having a low headline price, and then you pay for your seat, you pay for the armrest, and
the water. Everything.
Yeah, exactly. So
no, and then the thing I'll add to that is that's really like on the enterprise piece, but Tradelink is an even easier sell because Tradelink is free. So when I'm having the discussion, it's not about pricing. It's saying like, do you want a free product that's going to allow you to trade securely off exchange and actually make you pay less on trading fees, which they don't pay to us, by the way, that they pay the custodian and or to the exchange. But Tradelink is a free product that anyone can have access to.
That's an easy sell.
Yeah.
What's the biggest misconception about Ledger Enterprise or things around it that you'd like to debunk?
I think there's a level of people see it as something more complex maybe than it is. It's definitely complex on the technical side, but but as a user, it's not that complex. I think that's one of the things also that we've been trying to do is to be more use more layman terms and really like make sure that people understand that it doesn't have to be that complicated. But I think the complexity piece is really important. There is complex technology to secure your assets, but we want it to be as easy to use as possible for you, right? And I think the stacks migration piece is a good mirroring of that, because the idea is to say, listen, what you do, your enterprise software shouldn't be harder to use than any of your personal apps that you have on your phone, for example, right? Like, why? Why does enterprise have to be more complicated? It doesn't have to. Often it is, but it doesn't have to. So we try to simplify and make sure that people don't think, oh my God, I'm going to go in, it's going to be so complicated, I'm going to have to do this, to do that, et cetera. I'm going to have to learn. There's going to be a really high learning curve. No, it should be easy.
Yeah. What's a question that you wish people would ask, but they don't?
That's a great question. I think people should ask more about, what they can do. Like I think, and this is interesting because I think that when we started, we were talking a lot to maybe CIOs or people in treasury, et cetera, et cetera. So it's one side of the business that's really very focused on the security aspect. And they're not necessarily going to see or care so much about, hey, what can I do with my crypto? Can I actually make this amount that I have work for me and actually grow over time? So one of the questions that I would like them to, but that we're getting more and more because through Tradelink we're talking to different stakeholders, is like, hey, I want people to not see us as a cost center. I want people to see us as a way for them to make more money. So I would want them to ask me, how can you make me more money?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a great question for people coming in. All right, let's close it out. Last two questions here. What was your biggest learning from the market in 2024?
That it's resilient, right? I mean, I've only been in the crypto space for 3 years, and so I came in pretty much right before the bear, a few months before it all started. And I've been around tech for a long time, and I've seen downturns. I've seen the dot-com bubble. I've seen a lot of these different things, but this felt a bit different because this is really a new space, right? Like if you're selling books online, right? There's still people selling books somewhere else, right? Whereas crypto is really its own ecosystem. But what I learned is the level of resilience that the space has, and what I love also is just how many true believers there are, right? I think that's not from 24. I think it's from before, but the true believers were really proven right? Like the Raoul Pauls, obviously Michael Saylor, et cetera. I think that's really been exciting and amazing to see.
And what's your prediction for 2025?
I think it's going to be, and I said this to my team just a couple of hours ago, I think it's going to be a transformative year for the crypto ecosystem. I don't think, and I think that it's going to go beyond 25. I think 25 is going to be the beginning of it, but I think it's going to be transformative, and transformative obviously in a very positive way, but that's what I see, transformation. That's what we love as human beings, right? We want transformation, growth, evolution.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, crypto is transformative.
It is.
To humanity. And Ledger is, within that crazy world, a haven. And that can be in the retail way or in the enterprise way. I agree, and it's great to see, we've been those believers, and we worked very hard on these products during the bear market, and it's exciting to be able to go back out there and show them to people and to get them on, to bring them on board to enterprise with Stacks, to bring them on board to Flex, to Stacks as retail customers. So
yeah, and to have the right rails. Any evolution, any tech evolution needs the right rails. And I think like Ledger is really a big part of that, right? Like you need to have the right base to build a house. You need to, and we're building that. I think that's really exciting.
Ledger Enterprise, rails for whales.
Yeah, there you go.
What do you think?
Not bad.
All right. Thank you, Sim.
Man.
Good luck out there. I can't wait to be around the world with you this year, literally.
It's gonna be fun.
Talking about Ledger.
Let's do it.
So it's a great way to start the year. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Ledger podcast for our 2025 institutional kickoff. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you're part of an institution and would like a demo of Ledger Enterprise, just click on the link in the show description. Would love to connect. And don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or follow the show on your preferred podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep bringing you the best content possible. Till next time, stay secure.